everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
Welcome to Novels Wonderland, Junji Ito. I shall smash Hellstar Remina, chapter 57-70, The Strange Guest. 1,312 words. After listening to Renko's proposal, Amamiya Rin's expression was one of dumbfounded bewilderment. He knew this world was very idealistic, operating on mind-over-matter principles, but he hadn't expected that one could act like a coward, shrinking one's head like a turtle even when facing a vengeful spirit, and that this would actually be a valid strategy. It was a bit like Miyaruko-chan, but even more demanding. Miyaruko-chan only required pretending not to see. This, however, required starting from the psychological level, even involving causality. One had to sever the connection at the level of mind and memory to have any possibility of escape. Apart from this, there is no other way. The Seki family's Juon is the most unique category among the Juon I know, so don't count on me to exterminate her. Renko's answer was extremely firm, negating any plan other than evasion. 2 words, no solution. I understand. Amamiya Rin nodded slightly. He wasn't some reckless fool who would provoke Kayako out of a moment of hot-headed bravery. After expressing his thanks and hanging up the phone, Amamiya Rin realized something. The police history compilation office seemed to be truly useless. Renko, who could exterminate a split spirit of Tamamonome, would be considered a tough character in any worldview. But this happened to be a world where humanity faced extinction at the drop of a hat, so Renko and the police history compilation office could only serve the role of a cleanup crew. Rin-kun? Is it very serious? Fujino Terumi nervously observed the changes in Amamiya Rin's expression, her fingers unconsciously clasping together, her eyes filled with unease. She had originally thought this was just an ordinary supernatural incident, but the words Amamiya Rin spoke and his expressions while on the phone with Kazumi Junya all proved the severity of the situation. Amamiya Rin set his mobile phone aside. He didn't answer directly, instead, he fished a silver pocket watch out of his hospital gown's pocket. This was a gift Professor Matsuura had once given him, used for learning and performing hypnosis. It's more complex than I imagined, but it's not hopeless. Amamiya Rin held the chain, lifting the pocket watch. The pocket watch swung slowly in mid-air, its silver case glinting with a cold light under the hospital ward's illumination. Look at this. Relax. Focus your gaze here. I need to help you build some psychological defenses, this can reduce the risk. Although Fujino Terumi was puzzled, her trust in Amamiya Rin made her comply, focusing her gaze on the gently swaying pocket watch. Inhale, exhale, follow my lead. As the watch swayed, Fujino Terumi's gaze moved left and right with it. Simultaneously, she subconsciously followed Amamiya Rin's prompts, causing a subtle change in the rhythm of her breathing. Slowly, her breathing, which had been slightly rapid due to nervousness, stabilized without her realizing it. Very good. Now, take a slow deep breath, feel your body gradually relaxing. Amamiya Rin's voice gradually became distant, like ethereal clouds on the horizon, or like a stream flowing in a mountain ravine. Fujino Terumi's chest rose and fell slightly with Amamiya Rin's commands, the rhythm of her breathing slowing down unwittingly. For a moment, the hospital ward was unusually quiet, save for the even sounds of their breathing and the almost inaudible mechanical ticking of the swinging watch. The night outside the window seemed to become even more still, the distant city noise appearing as if isolated in another world. Amamiya Rin carefully observed Fujino Terumi's reaction. Seeing her eyes gradually lose focus and become somewhat dazed, and her body posture visibly relaxing, he continued the hypnosis. Regarding that house in Narama Ward, regarding the Seki family, regarding the so-called curse, these are all just distant urban legends, completely unrelated to your daily life. They are not in your world, they are very far away from you. Just a story you heard by chance, not worth mentioning, something you will forget as soon as you turn your head. Amamiya Rin's tone was level. Utilizing the hypnosis techniques learned from Professor Matsuura, he step-by-step guided Fujino Terumi's consciousness. Harase Kyoko is just one of your many peers. Her work, her life, do not intersect much with yours. You are just ordinary acquaintances who meet occasionally. As the hypnosis proceeded, the sky outside darkened completely, the ink-black night curtain swallowing the last trace of twilight. The light in the hospital ward seemed to dim inexplicably for a split second, the bulb flickered as if from unstable voltage, then returned to normal. Amamiya Rin's speaking speed didn't change in the slightest, but the fingers gripping the watch chain tightened imperceptibly. A wave of causeless chill silently climbed up his spine. The air seemed to become damp and heavy, raising a layer of fine goosebumps on his arms exposed outside the hospital gown. The sound of traffic on the distant street outside the window, originally faintly audible, now became exceptionally distant, as if cut off by something. You will not go out of your way to ask about her current situation, nor will you take the initiative to contact her. Amamiya Rin's voice echoed in the quiet hospital ward, yet it seemed to be partially absorbed by the invisible air, appearing somewhat hollow. Wrong. Something was wrong. Amamiya Rin's breathing rhythm didn't falter, and his tone maintained the hypnosis technique, but all his senses were now highly concentrated. The clarity brought by Diana allowed him to perceive changes in the atmosphere better than ordinary people. He felt a gaze. Right behind him. The sensation of being watched came from behind. The hairs on the back of Amamiya Rin's neck stood on end, but he controlled himself and did not look back. Because he knew that behind him, apart from the wall, there was nothing. However, that sensation of being watched was terrifyingly real. It was as if there really was an extra person behind him, standing right there. Perhaps sitting by the bed. Perhaps leaning against the headboard. Perhaps pressed right against his back. Every breath hit his neck, close at hand, making the hairs on his neck stand up. Meanwhile, Fujino Terumi in front of him was completely immersed in the guided state of relaxation, oblivious to the changes around them. Fujino Terumi, close at hand, didn't feel whether there was an extra person in the room that should only have two. Amamiya Rin wanted to turn his head. But he didn't. He knew he couldn't turn his head. Amamiya Rin only shifted his eyeballs slightly, glancing out of the corner of his eye at the wall beside the hospital bed. The wall was empty, save for the elongated, slightly swaying shadows of him and Fujino Terumi cast by the light. But it felt very unfamiliar. Inexplicably, the shadows on the wall gave Amamiya Rin a sense of unfamiliarity, as if those two shadows didn't belong to him and Fujino Terumi. Moreover, that sensation of being stared at intently didn't weaken in the slightest. Instead, it became clearer, more oppressive, as if that thing had moved closer again, close enough that he could almost feel the tactile sensation brought by the outline of its existence. Close enough that it seemed the owner of the gaze was already pressed against him, its shadow already overlapping with his. That was why he could only see his own shadow on the wall. That was why he felt his own shadow was so unfamiliar. ______. The director is back. But with a brand new look, hee. New story, Classroom of the Elite, Black Sphere Academia. White heavy checkmark, read 40 chapters ahead on all series. White heavy checkmark, get exclusive content and updates. Help us hit our targets. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 free chapter for all. 140 members equals plus 5 bonus chapters, all stories. P. Walnut-chan. Chapter 58, This is how friends are used. 1,400 words. Amamiya Rin guarded his mind, eliminating all thoughts of phenomena that shouldn't be contemplated. Within his focused intent, it was as if the anomalies in the room had never existed from start to finish. You will reduce the frequency of your visits to the hospital, return to a normal daily routine, study hard, and improve yourself every day. Now, you will feel very good, very relaxed. When I count to 3, you will wake up feeling refreshed and invigorated. He concentrated his attention on Fujino Terumi, continuing the steps of the hypnosis. 1. The lights in the hospital ward seemed to flicker for a moment, at an extremely high speed, perhaps due to unstable voltage. 2. Amamiya Rin's voice became increasingly faint, as if a large portion of it were being sucked away by the air. 3. The moment his voice fell, Amamiya Rin snapped his wrist back, firmly grasping the pocket watch in his palm. Fujino Terumi's eyelashes trembled a few times before she slowly opened her eyes. Almost simultaneously, that hair-raising sensation of being watched vanished just as abruptly as it had appeared. The heavy atmosphere in the hospital ward lifted along with it, returning to a normal feeling. The faint sound of traffic outside the window became clear once again. Fujino Terumi's gaze was initially a bit dazed, but it soon focused, and she revealed a cheerful smile at Amamiya Rin. "It feels so amazing, I feel like I've relaxed a lot." Fujino Terumi rubbed her temples, seemingly completely unaware of any abnormality. "This is a psychological therapy I learned from a psychology professor. It can alleviate stress for people." Amamiya Rin looked at her utterly ignorant face, put the pocket watch back into his pocket, and returned a faint smile. However, beneath this smile, a trace of heaviness that was hard to dissipate remained hidden. "Just my rotten luck. This is great. Fujino Terumi has no pressure now, all the pressure has come to me." Amamiya Rin smiled bitterly and complained in his heart. At the same time, he shifted his position, his gaze inadvertently sweeping over the area behind him, the very direction where he had just felt the stare. It was empty there. There were only the pristine white walls of the hospital ward and his own shadow, elongated by the light, cast upon them. Wonderful. Truly wonderful. He, a semi-invalid with limited mobility, had to single-handedly withstand a group of concept-level curses. Does Big Brother Jesus even have this kind of tanking capability? Amamiya Rin found amusement in his suffering, the corner of his mouth twitching. "It's already dark. You should hurry back. If there isn't anything urgent, it's best not to walk at night, and don't come to such a remote place." Turning his head, Amamiya Rin spoke to Fujino Terumi. "As it stands, the probability of Fujino Terumi being killed has dropped to 10%, while the probability of him being victimized has risen to 90%. If this woman comes a few more times, his efforts will effectively be in vain." He didn't worry about having too many debts himself, but he was afraid of others dragging him down. Fujino Terumi nodded upon hearing this, a relaxed smile still hanging on her face. "Men, then I'll head out first. Rin-kun, you rest well." She picked up her bag, waved to Amamiya Rin, and left the hospital ward with brisk steps. The door gently closed. When Fujino Terumi disappeared from his line of sight, the smile on Amamiya Rin's face instantly vanished. What should I do now? Amamiya Rin fell into deep thought. Combat is impossible. Even Indorenko couldn't deal with Kayako, so naturally, he can't either. Adopt Indorenko's suggestion of self-deception? That only lowers the probability of Kayako seeking him out. Kayako seemed to have already visited just now, trying to deceive himself at this point would likely be too late. There is only one way left. The old man once said, to defeat magic, you must use magic. The success rate of exterminating Kayako is 0, but what about controlling Kayako? Demonic Mountain, Aokigahara. In Amamiya Rin's impression, only these two places in the Junji Ito series can target souls. The former, a place the protagonist called the Demonic Mountain, contains a tunnel. That tunnel devours life, the devoured dead cannot even escape with their souls. The latter, Aokigahara at Mount Fuji, contains a dragon's mouth. The so-called dragon's mouth is an exit for the spirit flow. The spirit flow is a phenomenon where souls flow densely, a massive amount of souls will gush out like a mudslide from the cavern named Dragon's Mouth. The spirit flow dissolves the excess parts of the human body. Once or twice is harmless, and one's physical constitution might even improve, presumably due to residual spiritual energy. But if it happens many times, one's mind will change, and the body will become slender and elongated. If one is washed away by the spirit flow, it's even more dangerous, one will dissolve into a streamlined monster, never to escape. Amamiya Rin doesn't know where the demonic mountain is, but the spirit flow and the dragon's mouth are right at Mount Fuji. If he can make Kayako stay within the spirit flow when it appears, he might be able to borrow the power of the spirit flow to flush Kayako into hell. So, here comes the problem, how am I supposed to bring her to Mount Fuji? Amamiya Rin muttered to himself. This is just like putting an elephant into a refrigerator, it only requires 3 steps. Open the refrigerator door, put the elephant in, close the refrigerator door. But how is the middle step supposed to be carried out? He can't possibly run to Mount Fuji right now, can he? That would just make him die faster. Running to climb a mountain in his physical state, he probably wouldn't even have the strength to flee when Kayako finds him. Don't panic, Amamiya Rin. Don't lose your footing. Amamiya Rin closed his eyes, calmly organizing the train of thought in his brain. He hasn't been to the haunted house, nor has he had contact with anyone who entered the haunted house. Even if he has been noticed by Kayako, he is still at the bottom of Kayako's death list. Before those who directly entered the haunted house and those investigating it have died off, it won't be his turn yet. My friends, do you all have a place to live? With a shift of thought, Amamiya Rin had an idea and asked in the Tomi network. What do you want to do? I advise you to act like a decent human being. Upon hearing Amamiya Rin's inquiry, the Kawakami Tomis immediately went on alert. Just as their thoughts cannot be hidden from Amamiya Rin's thoughts cannot be hidden from them. At this very moment, they knew better than anyone what Amamiya Rin was thinking. Since you guys can't die anyway, and Kayako can't do anything to you, why not go occupy Kayako's house? Most of you are currently living in hotels or staying at other people's homes. Wouldn't it be more comfortable to have a house of your own? Amamiya Rin acted as if he didn't know the Tomis could hear his inner voice, speaking with righteous confidence. Go die. Even if I can't die, I don't want to split off a counterfeit. Do you think I enjoy dying? Thoughts of resistance surged toward Amamiya Rin. The Kawakami Tomis were more annoyed than the last, none willing to accept Amamiya Rin's request, and they took this opportunity to scold Amamiya Rin severely. Relax. Kayako's killings are usually curse kills or hanging, rarely causing obvious external trauma. How about this? Any Kawakami Tomi willing to move into the haunted house will not be selected as a subject for Article 3 of the contract. Amamiya Rin didn't care about the women's resistance and persuaded them with great patience. _______. The director is back. But with a brand new look, hee. New story, Classroom of the Elite, Black Sphere Academia. White heavy checkmark, read up to 40 chapters in advance, all stories. White heavy checkmark, access exclusive posts and updates first. Let's achieve our community goals. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 extra chapter for everybody. 140 members equals plus 5 additional chapters on all stories. P. Walnut-chan. Chapter 59, This is how the undying body is used. 1,380 words. In Amamiya Rin's impression, there were certain Japanese horror movies where, if death had a triggering mechanism, one could force others to trigger a higher priority mechanism, acting as a scapegoat to delay one's own time of death. For instance, The Ring and Shiraisan both operated on this principle. Since that was the case, wouldn't it be a waste not to utilize a group of immortals with terrible personalities as companions? However, Amamiya Rin's conditions held little allure for the Kawakami Tomis. In fact, some Kawakami Tomis were already hunting for other Kawakami Tomis, intending to drag them into the Tomi network to reduce the probability of being selected themselves. If the likelihood of being chosen decreased, why would they go looking for trouble? If you ask me, you deserve it. Exactly. Who told you to be a busybody? Seeking your own death, you can't blame us even if you die. Don't worry, we will remember you forever. Although your person dies, you will live eternally in our hearts. I'll help you scout for a nice cemetery. Once you're dead, just stay honestly in hell. Don't pop back out. Po-ho-ho. He can't go to hell. In his impression, those killed by Kayako can't even escape with their souls. The Kawakami Tomis habitually began to ridicule and mock Amamiya Rin. The Tomi network was as festive as the New Year. These women were certain Amamiya Rin wouldn't live much longer and had already started preparing for his funeral. How was I supposed to know Fujino Terumi would be unlucky to this extent? Amamiya Rin sighed with a bitter smile. Had he known earlier that Fujino Terumi was connected to Ju-on, he likely wouldn't have stepped in to help. After all, when successful, one aids the whole world, when poor, one attends to one's own virtue. doing good deeds requires acting within one's means. Fine then. Since you are unwilling, I won't force you. Amamiya Rin feigned a retreat, not coercing the Kawakami Tomis. Great. You still have a bit of gentlemanly grace, after all. After you die, we'll find time to burn incense for you. The Tomis became carried away with triumph due to Amamiya Rin's concession. Sharp cheers echoed through the neural network. They were just short of throwing a party to celebrate. Just as the clamor of this group of Tomis reached its peak, Amamiya Rin entered a state of deep dhyana. Following the thoughts within the Tomi network, he observed Tomi number 25, whom he had abandoned just moments ago. Kawakami Tomi had already left the dojo. At this moment, she was sitting in the back seat of a taxi, leisurely watching the night scenery fly by outside the window, her fingers idly curling a lock of black hair. Suddenly, an irresistible state of consciousness synchronized with Kawakami Tomi's brain. That detestable sense of tranquility shrouded her body and mind. Her spirit involuntarily sublimated, dissecting her own heart and existence. Kawakami Tomi's body stiffened, and the fingers curling her hair came to a halt. I knew you wouldn't honestly practice with the sword, she muttered to herself, her face wearing an unsurprised expression of calm. However, managing to scam the Yagyu Shinkage-ryu strategy book into your hands and reading it once before running away. I suppose you put some heart into it. After Amamiya Rin withdrew his consciousness, Kawakami Tomi had given up on continuing her training. She tricked Sato Shirhan into giving her the Yagyu Shinkage-ryu strategy book, read it with a glance, taking in 10 lines at a time, and left immediately after finishing. The taxi she was now on had already reached the city center. However, now that their minds were synchronized, Amamiya Rin couldn't be bothered to verbally lecture Kawakami Tomi. He had the driver take him to the high-end apartment where Kawakami Tomi lived. Upon getting out of the car, returning to the residence, and closing the door, she began a new round of training. Did you know? Breathing techniques have limits. But neither the Six Wondrous Gates breathing technique nor the Yagyu Shinkage-ryu's breathing method has reached that limit. Why is that? Amamiya Rin sat cross-legged on the bed, asking and answering himself. Because, no matter what kind of breathing method it is, once it exceeds a certain degree, it will cause harm to the human body. For example, the Valsalva maneuver, taking a deep breath and then holding it while exhaling forcefully to increase intrathoracic pressure. But excessive force can trigger cardiovascular risks and retinopathy. There is also hyperventilation, which can expel a large amount of carbon dioxide from the body and delay the appearance of fatigue in the respiratory muscles, but it easily causes dizziness, numbness in the hands and feet, and even fainting. Speaking to this point, the corners of Kawakami Tomi's mouth raised slightly, as if revealing a smile. But, your body is different, Tomi. You have infinite regeneration capabilities. This allows us to conduct some radical experiments. Amamiya Rin closed his eyes and began to adjust the breathing. At first, it was simply the Six Wondrous Gates breathing technique. Inhalation was deep and slow, like a stream flowing into a deep pool. Exhalation was long and drawn out, like morning mist quietly dispersing. Tomi's chest rose and fell steadily, her body gradually entering a relaxed state. This breathing method was gentle and continuous, bringing no discomfort to the human body. Next, he switched to the breathing rhythm of the Shinkage-ryu. Inhalation was rapid and powerful, like the concentration before drawing a blade. Exhalation was a swift explosion, simulating the ki at the moment of a slash. The diaphragm contracted abruptly, and the air in the lungs was quickly squeezed out, bringing a taut sensation of gathering strength. Now, try combining them. Amamiya Rin carefully began the fusion. When inhaling, he first took in air with the deep, long rhythm of the Six Wondrous Gates. Just as the breath was full but not yet overflowing, he switched to the power-accumulating inhalation of the Yagyu style. When exhaling, he initiated with the swift, explosive burst of the Yagyu style, then transitioned into the long, extending tail note of the Six Wondrous Gates. The two breathing techniques alternated continuously. Gradually, what started as merely an awkwardness and rhythm, as if the chest cavity and diaphragm were dancing to a misstepped beat, began to intensify into a sense of anomaly after several cycles. Clear distending pain transmitted from Tomi's lungs, as if air were being forcibly poured in yet could not be effectively exchanged. Oxygen seemed to be sucked in, yet it stagnated within the alveoli, failing to blend smoothly into the blood. A slight sense of vertigo and irritability surged into the brain. The edges of her vision began to turn black, and a subtle ringing sounded in her ears. Amamiya Rin, however, cared nothing for this sense of anomaly. Faster. He accelerated the frequency of the breathing, deliberately manufacturing mild hyperventilation. Inhalation became greedy and rushed, the rib cage expanded unnaturally, and an overwhelmed soreness arose in the ribs. Exhalation also became cruder, the airflow rushing out of the throat carrying a rasping noise. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood was rapidly altered. The tips of Tomi's fingers began to go numb, trembling slightly and uncontrollably. Her lips also lost some of their color, taking on a faint, bruised purple hue. Continue. Amamiya Rin remained unmoved, maintaining this rapidly shifting breathing. A moment later, flickering spots of light began to appear at the edges of Tomi's vision, and the tinnitus buzzed loudly. These were signs of cerebral vasoconstriction and insufficient oxygen supply. Still not enough. Amamiya Rin further adjusted the breathing pattern, conducting different attempts. Before long, the pressure inside Tomi's chest cavity rose sharply. An unnatural flush appeared on her cheeks, her jugular veins bulged slightly, and a distending pain came from her eyeballs, as if they would burst from their sockets at any moment. Walnut-chan, winky face. New history, group chat of the dead. White heavy checkmark jump 40 chapters ahead of the public release. White heavy checkmark get access to special perks and news. Help smash these goals. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 bonus chapter, for everyone. 140 members equals plus 5 extra chapters, for all stories. P. Walnut-chan. Chapter 60, Saber Yagyu Taijima no Kami Munanori. 1,443 words. Stop. Amamiya Rin relaxed in time, allowing Tomi's body to resume normal breathing. In just a moment, Kawakami Tomi's body returned to normal, leaving absolutely no trace of injury. Amamiya Rin, meanwhile, recorded the sensations brought about by each breath. The spasmodic areas, the degree of dizziness, the patterns of visual distortion, the frequency of palpitations, all discomforts were incomparably clear under his observation. After a moment, Amamiya Rin began a new round of testing. Time and time again, through the state of observation, he captured the subtle changes in the body and brain. Relying on Kawakami Tomi's undying body, he conducted the most radical attempts, gradually modifying and trying to fuse the two breathing methods. This was something only Amamiya Rin and Kawakami Tomi could accomplish. Amamiya Rin's dhyana state ensured he could remember the minutest changes and remain lucid, while Kawakami Tomi's undying body guaranteed the self-healing of injuries and the sustainability of the attempts. From 8 to 12 o'clock, a total of 4 hours, Amamiya Rin conducted dozens of attempts. He tried every variation of breathing method and rhythm, memorizing every sensation with the body, before gradually exiting the dhyana state. At the same time, Tomi bolted upright from the bed. Her hands clutched her chest tightly, and she gasped for air in great, rough heaves, as if she had just startled awake from a nightmare of drowning. A tearing, burning pain still lingered in her lungs, her throat was dry and hoarse, and spots that had not yet dissipated remained before her eyes. It hurts to death. You bastard, Amamiya Rin. Her resentment pierced sharply into the Tomi network. However, this time, the response she received was no longer gloating concurrence. I feel a bit out of breath over here too. My chest is so tight. I've forgotten how to breathe. Chaotic thoughts permeated the Tomi network. Disordered breathing, insufficient oxygen supply, and the lingering effects of pressure on the brain and internal organs were transmitted outward from Tomi number 25. Although not as intense as what Kawakami Tomi herself felt, that discomfort threw the breathing rhythm of every Tomi into disarray. Amamiya Rin's expression was composed as he received the feedback from Kawakami Tomi. I agree. Tomi number 25's shrill voice rang out in the Tomi network. The haunted house in Narama Ward, I'll move in. Go use someone else for cultivation. Amamiya Rin was truly using her to the point of death. Having experienced this radical cultivation process once, she absolutely did not want to experience it a second time. Aren't you lacking a bit of ambition? I wanted to forge you into a unique Yagyu Tomi, you know? Amamiya Rin feigned disappointment. In reality, though, why did he torment Kawakami Tomi? Why didn't he force Kawakami Tomi to move into the haunted house? Wasn't it precisely for this? Kawakami Tomi possessed the aptitude of a D-class member, so naturally, she had to be used to her full potential. Wait a minute. One must finish what one starts in life, leave Kayako to me to deal with. Hey, what a coincidence. I was just thinking of changing residences to relax. A dilapidated house actually has a unique flavor. Oh my, are you sure you all can handle it? Isn't it very dangerous there? Better let me go. Having felt Kawakami Tomi's plight once, the Tomis immediately began fighting over the residency rights for the Juon house. Amamiya Rin did not conceal his thoughts. Everyone realized just how fierce Amamiya Rin's next training session would be in order to make them voluntarily go to their deaths. Don't rush. Take your time. Everyone, find a place to rest first. In another half hour, I'm going to sleep. In the long dream world, you all have plenty of time to negotiate. Amamiya Rin closed his eyes to rest his mind, speaking without haste or impatience. Upon hearing this, the Tomis sprang into action, each returning to their bedrooms. Half an hour later, in a ward at Toto General Hospital, Amamiya Rin's consciousness gradually became blurry, sinking into the incomparably long dream world. Consciousness shifted from blurry to clear. The first thing he felt was the slightly damp earth beneath his feet. The air was filled with the specific crispness of a mountain morning, mixed with the fragrance of soil and grass. Beside his ears were the crisp chirping of birds and the sound of a sword slicing through the air coming from the distance. Amamiya Rin opened his eyes. He was already situated in a primitive mountain dojo. Verdant green embraced the surroundings, in the distance, mountain ranges layered upon one another, with thin mist coiling through the forest. The dojo was built from raw timber. Old copper bells hung from the eaves, emitting crisp, pleasing sounds as they swayed in the wind. In the open space of the dojo, a figure was practicing swordsmanship. That person wore a brown kimono. The lines of the Yagyu-gasa crest on his chest were concise and powerful. His white hair was combed meticulously, not a strand out of place. His face was resolute, his forehead broad, and between his brows settled a steadiness polished by the years. His eyes were like sharp blades hidden in a sheath, flickering with a stern, divine light. He held a wooden sword. His movements did not seem fast, yet every chop, thrust, slash, and parry carried the momentum of 1,000 jun. They were precise and efficient, without the slightest excess. His breathing was long and profound, perfectly synchronized with his movements, as if he had merged into one with the aura of the surrounding mountain forest. Yagyu Taijima no Kami Munenori. A Shurhan generated by Amamiya Rin's subconscious and his memories regarding the Yagyu Shinkijryu. His prototype was the swordsman heroic spirit from Type Moon. Yagyu Munenori withdrew his stance and stood, the wooden sword hanging naturally at his side. He turned around, looking at Amamiya Rin with an indifferent gaze. Without any pleasantries, he spoke directly, no need for words. Take a sword. Use actual combat to memorize the sword of the Yagyu Shinkijryu. Amamiya Rin also wasted no words. He took a wooden sword from the rack nearby. In weight, length, and feel, it was exactly the same as the wooden sword in reality. He adjusted his breathing and naturally assumed the middle stance, Chuden no Kami, his gaze locking onto Yagyu Munenori through the wooden sword. The sounds of the mountain forest gradually faded away. Amamiya Rin's perception was highly concentrated, time seemed to slow down, leaving only Yagyu Munenori, himself, and the distance between them. Yagyu Munenori did not attack immediately. He likewise assumed the middle stance. His figure was as steady as a mountain, containing an immeasurable pressure. Attack! Yagyu Munenori's voice had not yet settled when Amamiya Rin had already charged forward. He stepped out with his left foot, sank his center of gravity, and gripping the sword with both hands, he traced a fierce arc, slashing diagonally from the upper right to the lower left, one stroke, two halves. The blade edge went straight for Yagyu Munenori's left shoulder, carrying a momentum of indomitable will. Yagyu Munenori's eyes shifted slightly. At the instant the wooden sword reached his body, he rotated his body to the rear right, his left foot following the momentum to step forward half a pace. He let that fierce blade skim past his kimono, slashing into empty air. Amamiya Rin's strike hit nothing, and his body leaned forward slightly due to inertia, leaving his left rib cage wide open. Yagyu Munenori's technique was not yet spent. While dodging sideways, the wooden sword in his hand had already swung upward from below, the tip slashing toward Amamiya Rin's left ribs. Amamiya Rin pressed his wooden sword down, attempting to block. As the two swords collided, his arm shook violently, and his blocking motion was scattered. However, this brief obstruction was enough. The moment Amamiya Rin succeeded in blocking, Yagyu Munenori stepped forward as if he were a shadow following a form. With a turn of his wrist, the wooden sword traced a bizarre semi-arc in the air. Bypassing the defense Amamiya Rin had hastily formed, it changed direction with the agility of a swift, pointing the sword tip straight at his Adam's apple. _______. He. Walnut-chan for more chapters. New history, group chat of the dead. White heavy checkmark unlock a 40 chapter backlog for all my series. White heavy checkmark receive exclusive content and regular updates. Help us reach these goals. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 universal bonus chapter. 140 members equals plus 5 extra chapters for all stories. P. Walnut-chan. Chapter 61, Unrivaled Swordsmanship. Sword Zen is 1. 1,472 words. Ugh. Amamiya Rin's body stiffened abruptly. All movement stagnated as a heavy sensation radiated from his throat, accompanied by an intense feeling of suffocation and the phantom pain of death. His brain reeled in a dizzy spell. When Amamiya Rin regained clarity, Yagyu Munenori had already returned to his starting position. Again. Use your body to memorize my sword. Seeing that Amamiya Rin's gaze was clear, Yagyu Munenori raised his wooden sword once more. Enduring the agonizing pain, Amamiya Rin assumed the same stance. Two figures crossed paths incessantly, the sound of clashing wooden swords echoing through the mountain valley. The sun gradually rose and then fell toward the west. Amamiya Rin was completely immersed in this efficient honing process. Every failure, every correction, carved the techniques of the Yagyu Shinkidryu deeper into his instinct. That's right. Failure. Failure. It was all failure. He couldn't win at all. The Yagyu Munenori before him was a manifestation of Amamiya Rin's impression of the Yagyu Shinkidryu. Techniques that Amamiya Rin knew of but had not mastered, this Yagyu Munenori had already thoroughly comprehended. Moreover, he would not make mistakes, nor would he reveal any openings. Every move and every form was perfect. This Yagyu Munenori's configuration was the true Type-Moon version, capable of leaving the historical Yagyu Munenori dozens of streets behind. 1 day, 2 days, 5 days, 10 days, 20 days, a month. Accepting high-intensity training, Amamiya Rin took only a little over a month to master the Sangaku, 3 studies, Hasei, 8 stances, Enpi, Swallow Flight, and Kyuka, 9 items. However, these 4 sets of techniques were merely the foundation of the Yagyu Shinkidryu, and also the techniques Amamiya Rin had truly learned in the real world. The higher-level Thunderblade, Small Turn, Secret Sword, and Mutadori, No Sword Grasp, he had only ever seen the secret manuals for these. He could only develop them himself under Yagyu Munenori's pressure. There were no days or months in the dream, only ceaseless cultivation. 1 year passed. 3 years passed. 5 years passed. 10 years passed. 15 years passed. The span of this dream was 5 years longer than the last. However, this long cultivation lasting 15 years also gave Amamiya Rin enough time to develop the secrets of the Yagyu Shinkidryu. Furthermore, by fusing the swordsmanship of the Yagyu Shinkajiryu with the modern kendo he had mastered, he created a Shinkajiryu that belonged to him. New Shadow Style Simple Domain transforms 100 stances into a single stance. Responding to 10,000 changes with unchangeability, it forms a defensive and offensive prejudgment circle within a radius of 2 meters, capable of adapting to any attack. New Shadow Style Suigetsu, Moon in the water drawing the blade, attacking, sheathing, and following up form a closed loop. It is the realm of stillness controlling speed, fast but not impetuous. New Shadow Style Shinmyoken, Divine Mystery Sword uses feints to entangle the enemy and real strikes to break defenses, shattering the stiffness of dense attacks. It realizes a 3-layer progression of striking, changing, and pressuring, avoiding the consumption of brute force. New Shadow Style Evil Slaying Thrust targets the enemy's gaps, using stillness to control motion for a guaranteed one-hit strike. It balances the finesse of ancient swordsmanship with the precision of modern kendo. Peerless Swordsmanship Swordzen Unity, a secret technique that can only be used after entering deep dhyana. At the instant the blade is drawn, it actively stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, prompting the adrenal glands to secrete massive amounts of adrenaline, and pushes the breathing technique to its limit to enhance physical constitution. 1/certain kill. However, the side effects are also significant. Neurotransmitter secretion disorder, heart palpitations, chest tightness, retrosternal stabbing pain, and respiratory alkalosis are all aftereffects. Red Lotus Breathing, a new style of breathing technique that combines and improves upon Yagyu Shinkajiryu, 6 wondrous gates, the Valsalva maneuver, rapid gas exchange, and ballistic stretching. In its base state, it can increase oxygen supply efficiency by 30%, movement precision by 50%, and swinging speed by 10%, while lowering physical stamina consumption by 20%. In its limit state, within 30 seconds, it can increase explosive power by 15%. However, if the duration exceeds 1 minute, it will lead to bodily function disorders. A total of 6 sets of techniques, these were Amamiya Rin's great achievements over 15 years. After a long 15 years, Amamiya Rin woke from the dream. Opening his eyes, his gaze gradually focused, reflecting the familiar white ceiling. The smell of disinfectant drilled into his nasal cavity, reminding him of where he was. The state of observation dissected his body and mind, clarifying his own existence. Flu. Su. Flu. Su. His body felt as heavy as if it were filled with lead. The sense of disconnection between flesh and consciousness was exceptionally distinct. Amamiya Rin slowly adjusted his breathing. The rhythm of the Red Lotus breathing had already been carved into his instincts. After a few cycles, powerful strength surged toward his limbs like a thawing stream carrying warmth, washing away that heavy sense of stagnation. Very good. Although I'm not yet sure if the data for the limit state matches the dream world, at least the deviation in basic efficiency is no greater than 1%. Amamiya Rin was very satisfied with the gains obtained from the dream world. At the same time, the 32 Kawakami Tomis also used Amamiya Rin's dhyana state to distinguish the boundary between reality and dreams. The Tomi network became lively once again. Amamiya Rin also joined the conversation at just the right moment. Have you all decided? Who is going to move into the haunted house? We've discussed it. A detached house can usually accommodate 4 people. Me, no. 2, number 3, and number 4 will move in. How about that? The moment Amamiya Rin's thought arose, he received an immediate response. Number 1, the first to be transformed into a Kawakami Tomi, triumphantly expressed their willingness. Amamiya Rin could sense their thoughts. A batch of 4 people would take turns living in the haunted house while simultaneously finding other counterfeits to pull into the Tomi network, further reducing the probability of themselves being selected. No problem. Do it today. You guys choose a time and move into that haunted house. Amamiya Rin naturally wouldn't haggle with them over these details, he only needed someone to stall Kayako's killing rhythm. As for pulling more Kawakami Tomis into the Tomi network, that could be considered a benefit to humanity. Half an hour later, when the nurse pushed the medication cart into the hospital ward, Amamiya Rin was standing in the open space beside his bed performing sub-yuri. His hands gripped the true red oak wooden sword, his movements slow yet steady. Every swing and chop was incomparably fluid. Seeing this scene, the nurse couldn't help but speak up to remind him, "Mr. Amamiya, you still have injuries on your body. Please do not engage in overly strenuous exercise to avoid splitting the wounds." Amamiya Rin slowly withdrew his stance and leaned the wooden sword gently against the wall. "Just stretching my muscles and bones a bit, it won't pull on the wounds. Besides, I feel like the injury on my shoulder has already healed a lot." He returned to the bedside and sat down. "You can't rely on your subjective feelings for this kind of thing." As the nurse spoke, she skillfully unraveled the old bandages. The wound was exposed to the air. 3 deep red scratch marks had already scabbed over, the edges slightly red. The nurse couldn't help but let out a surprised "eh?" It really did recover quickly. "The wound has basically healed. I told you, didn't I? The injury is pretty much better." Amamiya Rin glanced at the wound on his shoulder, a trace of confusion flashing through his eyes. He had noticed it over the past 2 days, his self-healing ability was somewhat abnormal. The speed at which his wounds recovered was too fast. Was it because of the vampire? After being scratched by a vampire, did he also acquire a vampire's constitution? Or was it because of Tomi? Because of the neural connection with the Tomi network, was his body being eroded by Tomi cells? Amamiya Rin wasn't sure. If it were the former, no blood bubble bushes had grown on his shoulder. If it were the latter, he didn't recall any precedent for a male Tomi. _______. Walnut-chan in P for more. New history, group chat of the dead. White heavy checkmark, get immediate access to 40 early chapters for all stories. White heavy checkmark, enjoy exclusive material and special announcements. Help us unlock these community rewards. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 bonus chapter for everyone. 140 members equals plus 5 extra chapters across all stories. P. Walnut-chan. Chapter 62, Tomi's Haunted House Great Adventure, Part 1. 1,337 words. Amamiya Rin had a premonition. Regardless of the cause, his body was likely already transforming into something non-human. No. It already was. His cranial nerves had already undergone modification. Although he wasn't very willing to admit it. But, spitting out nerve fibers, piercing into someone else's oral cavity, and connecting the other party's brain with his own, he could accomplish such things too. It was just that, shooting his cranial nerves into someone else's mouth, was too disgusting. All conditioned phenomena are like a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow. If one sees all forms as non-forms, then one sees the Tathagata. Amamiya Rin shook his head slightly, not caring much about the body's mutation. After all, whether the humans of this world and the humans of his past life were the same species was not even certain. Time reached noon. Naramo Ward. Inside a certain ordinary residential area, stood a rather large detached villa. On the brick gate pillar hung the nameplate of the previous resident. Is this the place? For beauties with identical figures and appearances appeared at the entrance of this detached villa, looking up to assess the house before them. This house looked no different from the others nearby, only long uninhabited and slightly dilapidated. The paint on the walls was mottled, the drainpipe tilted, and a piece of the outer wall was missing. Weeds in the yard grew calf-high, and untended shrubs brandished their branches like fangs and claws. However, just standing at the entrance, one could feel an unpleasant atmosphere. It was like a stone standing in the shade, standing silently under the warm sunlight. The air here seemed colder than elsewhere, faintly revealing an invisible sense of rejection. Those who dare to enter after feeling such an atmosphere are either ignorant or fearless. Of course, the ignorant being fearless is also a very common trait. Kawakami Tomi took out the key requested from the agency and opened the courtyard gate. The four looked at each other, expressions of disgust on their faces, and walked in one after another. Passing through the weed-overgrown front yard, they arrived at the main door of the detached villa. Opening the door, an unspeakable moldy smell lunged at their faces. What is this? Old and broken, and it smells weird. Kawakami Tomi pinched her nose, waving her hand in disgust, as if this could dispel the invisible stench. Exactly. Can people really live in a place like this? It feels like even the air is dirty. The other Tomis nodded in succession, the disgust on their faces intensifying. At the windowsill on the second floor, a woman in white with long hair looked down at the four women below with a cold gaze. Her eyes were filled with extraordinary malice and hatred. Kawakami Tomi did not notice the hatred directed at her in the slightest. Enduring her revulsion, she walked indoors. The light inside the house was very dim. All curtains were tightly closed. Only a little sunlight penetrating from the doorway barely illuminated a small area of the entryway. Turning on the electric light, the four women didn't take off their shoes either, stepping straight across the entryway and walking into the living room. Most of the living room furniture was covered by white dust cloths. Tomi casually lifted a dust cloth without raising much dust. Perhaps the program crew that visited some time ago had cleaned here, saving them some physical effort. The four women stepped on high heels, treading through the corridor and living room without scruples, roughly inspecting the indoor environment. The first floor had nothing good to see. A spacious Japanese-style room, a living room, then the kitchen and bathroom, as well as a staircase leading to the second floor. When Kawakami Tomi climbed to the stairwell landing where the stairs bent at a right angle, suddenly, the four of them simultaneously felt an indescribable sense of unease. Continuing upward felt like seeing a shark's fin pop out of the sea surface yet still going into the water. Or perhaps, walking amidst a pile of corpses that died from an infectious disease. It was roughly that kind of feeling. Perceptual defensive instincts told them so, they could not go up any further. What's the big deal? Unlike the rationality of most people that would suppress their sensibility, the Tomis simply didn't feel there was any danger that could harm them. As long as they weren't chopped into pieces to generate more counterfeits, there was nothing to be afraid of. Death? Pain? Those are also a type of amusement. Kawakami Tomi's footsteps became heavier, one step after another, climbing heavily up the stairs. The heavy noise echoed in the room. In the master bedroom on the second floor, the white-clothed woman's face twisted, her whole body emanating an aura of anger and spite. Meow. Suddenly, a shrill cat cry exploded, like nails scratching a blackboard. The piercing sound penetrated the heavy footsteps, ringing in the Tomi's ears. Kawakami Tomi was startled by the sudden cat cry, her whole body shuddering. She shouted in humiliation turned to anger. So noisy. Uncultured brute. Don't yell randomly. Kawakami Tomi's angry scolding echoed in the empty stairwell, appearing particularly loud. That cat cry stopped abruptly, as if it had never appeared, but the residual piercing sensation still lingered on the eardrums. Scared me. Another Tomi following behind patted her chest, her face still recovering from the shock, which immediately turned to annoyance. There are wild cats in this broken place? Maybe it's a ghost transformed from a cat that died here. The third Tomi spoke in a deliberate and gloomy tone, but her eyes were full of mockery. Ghost? Humph, let it come out and try. Watch me pierce its stomach with my high heels. The Tomi who spoke first sniffed disdainfully and continued walking upward. The light on the second floor was dimmer than the first, and the air was more stifling, carrying a mixed smell of aged dust and rotting wood. There were only 2 rooms here. Kawakami Tomi first opened the door next to the stairs to take a look. It was a Japanese-style room about the size of 8 tatami mats, appearing to be used as a storage room, piled with various sundries. Backing out of the room, she walked toward the room further inside. When she opened the door to the other master bedroom, a gush of turbid air surged out. Kawakami Tomi couldn't help but raise the corners of her eyes, her face full of displeasure. Don't block the way here, move aside quickly. The Kawakami Tomi behind pushed her, shoving Tomi into the bedroom, and the other 3 Tomis also walked in successively. The master bedroom was a Western-style room of about 10 tatami mats. An ornate chandelier hung from the ceiling. A large double bed was placed by the window, and on the bedside tables on both sides sat a pair of ceramic bedside lamps with white shades. Kawakami Tomi fumbled on the wall by the door, found the light switch, and pressed it. That ornate chandelier flickered a few times before lighting up. Dim yellow light spilled down, barely dispelling part of the darkness. However, the light seemed mixed with dust, it was hazy and unable to illuminate every corner. Instead, it made the room's atmosphere even more oppressive, and the air more stifling than when the lights were off. Under the illumination of the light, the floor seemed soaked in pigment, appearing even darker and duller. The shadows in the corners were exceptionally heavy, as if something was dormant there, quietly watching this group of uninvited guests. ______. Plus 40 ch, Walnut-chan. New history, group chat of the dead. White heavy checkmark read up to 40 chapters in advance, all stories. White heavy checkmark access exclusive posts and updates first. Let's achieve our community goals. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 extra chapter for everybody. 140 members equals plus 5 additional chapters on all stories. P. Walnut-chan. Chapter 63, Tomi's Haunted House Great Adventure, middle. 1,290 words. Not bad. Although it's not as good as the high-end hotels I lived in before, it's close enough. This room is mine. Tomi walked to the bedside in her high heels, her fingers brushing over the dust-accumulated bedpost. She surveyed the layout around her and spoke as if it were a matter of course. Compared to the Japanese-style room downstairs, this Western-style room was more spacious and suited her tastes better. We too will live in this one. You two live downstairs. Another Tomi took the opportunity to assign the rooms. There were 4 of them in 2 rooms. Asking any 2 of them to sleep on the sofa or in the utility room would certainly please no one, they had to pair up. Ha! Why does it belong to you? Just because your skin is thicker and your face is bigger than ours? The Tomi assigned to the Japanese-style room immediately bristled. She stared viciously at the Tomi opposite her and retorted loudly. Because I saw it first. What, you have a problem with that? I have a huge problem. You think you're the only one with eyes? The Tomis once again displayed their signature talent for infighting, completely ignoring the oppressive atmosphere and potential danger of the room as they quarreled endlessly. No one noticed that in the corner of the room, a patch of particularly heavy shadows seemed to squirm. A pale face peered out from the shadows. Black eyes, hollow and devoid of any luster, stared straight at the 4 arguing women. It was a little boy with deathly white skin. He was completely naked, wearing no clothes at all. He had appeared suddenly in a gap that no one had perceived, as quiet as a forgotten doll. He tilted his head slightly, as if confused by these women making such a racket in his home. The temperature in the bedroom slowly dropped, and the air became even more gloomy, yet this failed to attract the slightest attention from the Tomis. They were arguing inextricably, glaring viciously at one another. The little boy tilted his head, and with bare feet, walked step by step into their midst. He looked up, gazing expressionlessly at the 4 of them. Tomi was waving her arm, arguing excitedly. Her gaze swept over the top of the little boy's head, as if glancing at a piece of debris or furniture, without pausing in the slightest. The little boy stood quietly between the 4 quarreling Tomis just like that, ignored as if he were non-existent air. He blinked his hollow eyes, seemingly unable to comprehend this phenomenon. So, he opened his mouth. The corners of his mouth stretched toward his ears in an inhuman arc, almost splitting to the roots of his ears, revealing a pitch-black oral cavity. Meow. In the next moment, a cat cry, shrieked to the extreme of shrillness, exploded violently from his throat. This sound was completely unlike anything a human could produce. Carrying an incomparably intense penetrating power, it drowned out all the quarreling and stung Kawakami Tomi's eardrums with pain. The arguing came to an abrupt halt. The 4 Tomis shuddered simultaneously, startled by this sudden noise. They lowered their heads in unison, their astonished gazes finally focusing on this bare-bottomed child who had appeared in their midst at some unknown time. However, the astonishment lasted only for an instant, immediately replaced by intense annoyance and irritation. Where did this brat come from? Can't you see we're discussing serious business? The Tomi standing at the very front raised her eyebrows. Her right hand formed a knife hand, the muscles of her forearm tightening instantly. Her fingertips were like sharp arrowheads, slicing through the cold air as they stabbed toward the little boy's eyes with lightning speed. So noisy. Uncultured brat. Another Tomi moved almost in sync. She took a deep breath, expanding her chest. Her right hand formed a knife hand, abruptly slashing upward from her waist. It was an incomparably sharp upward slash, the edge of her palm aiming for the little boy's jaw, as if to slice him open from bottom to top. Annoying brat, don't get in the way. The third Tomi adopted a Kesagiri stance. Her arm, like a true sharp blade, raised high and swung down violently with the twisting force of her whole body. The edge of her palm chopped ruthlessly toward the back of the little boy's neck, the movement ferocious and merciless. Get lost. The fourth Tomi's attack was even more vicious. Her right arm was like a taut bowstring as she unleashed a savage horizontal chop straight at the little boy's temple. The heel of her palm carried a momentum that seemed to tear through everything, aiming for a one-hit kill. Four fatal palm strikes created blurred afterimages in the dim light. Eye-stabbing, jaw-splitting, neck-breaking, skull-crushing attacks launched from different angles almost sealed off every possibility of evasion for the little boy. The limit-breaking burst brought by the Red Lotus breathing allowed their movement speed to exceed their own physical limits. Those natural yet vicious killing moves vividly displayed the absurdity of the intruders acting as hosts and behaving with utter barbarity. Put. Smack. Thud. Crack. Dull impact sounds rang out almost indiscriminately. For a moment, the Tomi's palms and fingertips clearly felt the sensation of hitting a solid entity. It was a strange feeling, cold and stiff. Before even a look of confusion could surface in the little boy's large, hollow eyes, his thin, small body was torn and impacted by several massive forces simultaneously, and he was flung violently backward. Returning to exactly where he had come from, the small body smashed directly into the patch of shadow in the corner of the room. Like a water droplet merging into a lake, he vanished silently. However, although the brat had vanished, the stagnant air in the room and the increasingly icy chill proved that the little boy who had just appeared was no hallucination. Only, this bizarre interlude did not arouse Kawakami Tomi's vigilance. Just a ghost? What's the big deal about a brat? They had died an unknown number of times. If not for their undying bodies, they could have organized a night parade of 100 demons long ago. It hurts. Kawakami Tomi shook her arm and rubbed her chest, a look of grievance actually appearing on her face. To actually make me hit someone, doing such a crude thing made my hand hurt. Cut the crap. With my skin being so delicate, wouldn't it hurt when hit with force? Honestly, popping out suddenly to scare people. Smelly brat. My nail almost broke. The Tomis complained and cursed. No one cared about Seki Toshio's sudden appearance, they only cared about their own losses. However, probably because attacking Seki Toshio had allowed them to vent their anger, the tension between the Tomis was no longer so explosive. How about this? There's no result in continuing to argue. We'll take turns living in the master bedroom, switching every 2 days. How's that? Kawakami Tomi proposed. The other three looked at one another. Although they were still unwilling, continuing to argue was indeed not a solution. Fine, let's do as you said. The three Tomis curled their lips and nodded, accepting the proposal. The four finally reached a consensus and began tidying the room together, preparing for the night's rest. ______. Seek, Walnut-chan. New history, group chat of the dead. White heavy checkmark read 40 chapters ahead of everyone else. White heavy checkmark get cool exclusive stuff and updates. Let's hit these goals. 100 Power Stones equals 1 extra chapter for the public. 140 members equals 5 extra chapters on all stories for supporters. P. Walnut-chan. Chapter 64, Tomi's Haunted House Great Adventure, Part 2. 1,300 words. Deep in the darkness, cold and filthy malice spread like a physical substance, resembling aged bloodstains seeping into the grain of wood. Kayako's eyes stared at the four women who had intruded into her home. They possessed identical, abominably beautiful faces. Were they quadruplets? She didn't know, nor did it matter. She simply loathed them. She loathed their smooth skin, their graceful figures, and that vitality and coquettishness that seemed ready to spill over. Such women must have been held in the palms of their parents' hands, surrounded and cherished by men like stars around the moon, growing up recklessly under the sunlight, right? Just like the popular kids in the classroom, they could laugh and talk loudly, without scruples. It didn't matter if they offended others, because there was always someone to tolerate them. Completely different from herself, the opposite extreme. Since birth, she had always lived in pain. Ignored by everyone, forgotten, unneeded, like a small bug surviving under a roadside stone. Unforgivable. Unforgivable, unforgivable, unforgivable. Why was she so unfortunate? Why could others obtain happiness? She absolutely could not forgive this unfairness. Grudge, grudge, grudge. Completely unable to suppress it, nor did she want to suppress it. She wanted to make them feel the same misfortune as herself. Kawakami Tomi rubbed her sore wrist, pouting as she walked into the first-floor bathroom. She turned on the faucet. The cold water rushed out with a splashing sound, and the coolness from her fingertips slightly calmed the irritability in her heart. Honestly, this broken place. Kawakami Tomi rinsed her hands with cold water, then cupped some water and patted it onto her face. A few drops slid down her neck and into her collar. Turning off the faucet, Kawakami Tomi leaned in close to the mirror to check her makeup. The mirror's surface was somewhat blurry, reflecting her slightly impatient cheeks. Her hair bangs stuck to her forehead due to the cold water, so she raised her hand to arrange her beautiful hair, her fingertips flowing smoothly through the jet-black, silky strands. Suddenly, the tactile sensation at her fingertips became somewhat strange. Mixed within her soft black hair were a few strands of particularly dry hair, like split ends that hadn't been cared for in a long time. Kawakami Tomi frowned, hooking her finger around those few disobedient strands, wanting to smooth them out. However, the sensation grew worse and worse. Those hairs were abnormally withered, even slightly prickly to the touch. Moreover, the more she pulled, the more of them there seemed to be. They didn't feel at all like hair that should be growing on the head of a beauty like her. Kawakami Tomi pinched a clump of dry, knotted hair and pulled it before her eyes. What is this garbage? Such an ugly thing. Seeing that clump of hair, Kawakami Tomi subconsciously roasted it. This was definitely not her hair. Her hair had always been as smooth as silk, carrying a carefully maintained luster. But the clump in her hand was withered, yellow, and rough, and it even emitted a strange smell. Kawakami Tomi sniffed it. It was a moldy smell like dust accumulated in an old attic, mixed with a trace of damp, fishy stench. So disgusting. As if she had touched something dirty, Kawakami Tomi hurriedly shook off the clump of hair and looked up at the ceiling. On the white paint at the top of the bathroom, unbeknownst to her, a large patch of filthy black marks had spread out. It looked like water stains that had leaked for years, or perhaps the residue of some viscous liquid after it dried. From that black stain, a massive amount of hair dripped down like sewage, scattering over the top of her head as if weightless. When Kawakami Tomi looked up, the hanging strands brushed past her cheeks. The sensation was cold and slimy, carrying a strange smell mixed of dust and mold, like dead bugs crawling over her skin. Wah! The next moment, a cold binding sensation violently choked her neck. The hair scattered on her shoulders tightened instantly, almost cutting into Kawakami Tomi's flesh. She only had time to let out a gasp before her feet were lifted off the ground by a massive force, her body forcefully hoisted into mid-air. Her windpipe suffered intense compression. Kawakami Tomi's eyes bulged, her legs kicked wildly, knocking over a nearby bucket. Her hands frantically scratched at her neck, her fingernails gouging out bloody marks, yet she could not shake those strands of hair in the slightest. Her beautiful, glamorous face rapidly filled with blood and turned purple. Her mouth gaped open, but she couldn't inhale a single wisp of air. Gradually, Kawakami Tomi's convulsions weakened. Finally, like a broken doll, she hung motionless in the center of the bathroom, casting a swaying shadow under the dim light. At the same time Kawakami Tomi was killed by Kayako, in the master bedroom on the second floor, Tomi pulled open the drawer of the bedside table. A coffee-colored notebook and several photos appeared before her eyes. The person in the photos was a woman with long hair, wearing white clothes. Is this ugly woman the previous resident? Kawakami Tomi picked up the photo, took one look, and threw it onto the floor with a lack of interest. She opened the notebook with great interest. The content was written in not very pretty handwriting and included a few poorly drawn illustrations. Kobayashi. The first page of the notebook was filled with the word Kobayashi. Kawakami Tomi raised an eyebrow and flipped through it casually. Locked eyes with Kobayashi again today, it felt like my heart was about to burst. Kobayashi was reading manga at his usual bookstore again today. That's the shop Kobayashi visits often, so I always go around to the front to wait for him. Today, Kobayashi didn't come to school. Because I was worried, I went to check his apartment. Although I bought a bouquet, I really didn't dare to knock on the door, so I just stood outside Kobayashi's window for several hours. Ha! What the hell is this? A simp diary? Kawakami Tomi laughed unceremoniously. The other two Tomis also gathered around. Stepping on Kayako's photo, they squeezed to Kawakami Tomi's sides, stretching their necks to look at the notebook's contents. That woman named Midorikawa Manami, I can't stand her seducing my Kobayashi. It's impossible for Kobayashi to like that kind of vain woman. Kobayashi threw up a mess on the street in front of the store yesterday, but I couldn't help him pat his back. However, I hope he knows that even if it's Kobayashi's vomit, I can eat it. Midorikawa Manami definitely can't, but I can. I'm different from that woman, so I can't approach Kobayashi as blatantly as she does, but Kobayashi should understand my feelings. Ha 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 ha. Clown. This clown is too funny. She's a thorough pervert. You're kidding, right? Does such a clown really exist in the world? I thought only those men chasing me would do such ridiculous things. After all, she's an ugly woman. Even if she's chasing ugly men we wouldn't look at, she has to be even more humble. The Tomis erupted into unscrupulous laughter. They laughed until they leaned back and forth, pushing and shoving each other, successively collapsing onto that double bed covered with gray, old sheets, mocking the room and the owner of the notebook without any taboo. Underscore. Went more, Walnut-chan. New history, group chat of the dead. White heavy checkmark read 40 chapters ahead on every series. White heavy checkmark unlock supporter only perks and news. Let's reach these milestones together. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 free chapter for all readers. 140 members equals plus 5 bonus chapters for all series. Walnut-chan on P. Chapter 65, Tomi's Haunted House Great Adventure, complete. 2,423 words. In the second-floor bedroom, ear-piercing mocking laughter almost lifted the roof. The Tomis laughed until tears welled up in their eyes. They rolled around on the bed together like schoolgirls on a field trip. The laughter was brazen and full of vitality, overflowing with a cheerful atmosphere, as if tearing a rift through the gloom that had accumulated in this house for years. In the first-floor bathroom, Kawakami Tomi hung silently in midair. Her eyes had already lost their luster, her toes drooped weakly, and her lifeless figure interlaced with the shadows of the light, forming a bizarre silhouette. The old-fashioned light bulb emitted a faint bzzz sound due to poor contact. A faucet that wasn't completely tightened dripped water, tapping against the tiles one drop at a time. Apart from this, there was no other sound. The temperature dropped lower and lower. The chill was no longer flowing air, but a solidified entity, like deathly energy surging from deep underground mixed with angry malice, churning like boiling water. Pop! The light bulb suddenly let out a bursting sound. Glass fragments fell like rustling rain, and darkness thoroughly swallowed this narrow space, leaving only the laughter seeping in through the crack in the door. The withered hair wrapped around Tomi's neck began to squirm like living leeches, slowly loosening its shackles. Thud! The corpse fell limply to the ground, making a dull sound, its head twisted unnaturally to one side. Those hairs retracted into that filthy black stain on the ceiling. The color of the stain became heavier, like an ink pool soaked in blood and resentment. A viscous malice seeped out from there, pressing heavily into the air. The edges of the stain no longer blurred but shrank inward like a living thing, seemingly permeating completely into the ceiling, corroding the wall body and spreading upward. Quick! Turn the page, let's see what other fun there is. The Tomis were completely unaware. Kawakami Tomi reached out and grabbed the notebook thrown on the bed. She flipped backward. Today, Takeo, who discovered this notebook, killed me. After torturing me repeatedly, he cut my whole body into 1,000 pieces, then put my corpse into a plastic garbage bag and placed it in the ceiling. Why can a dead person write a diary? No one cared about such trivial matters. Finding nothing interesting there, Kawakami Tomi flipped back a few more pages. The family of a salesman named Murakami moved into my home, acting as if it belonged to them, changing the appearance of the house beyond recognition. Those guys look so happy and blissful. It is precisely because there are people like them who monopolize happiness that happiness will not favor me. I first attacked the eldest daughter, Kanna, and killed her. I killed the eldest son, Tsuyoshi, and incidentally killed Tsuyoshi's cute girlfriend too. I killed the mother, Noriko. I killed the head of the household, Murakami Keiichi. The Murakami family is completely exterminated. Kawakami Tomi absent-mindedly scanned the killing content of the diary, then flipped back a few more pages. It was all Kayako's self-narration of what methods she used to kill what kind of people. TCH. Kawakami Tomi let out a scornful sound. It's all boring stuff. If it were an ordinary person, they would probably be frightened by this death note. However, in Kawakami Tomi's memories, the variety of her deaths definitely exceeded Kayako's killing methods by 100 times. 1,000 times. It's normal. For this kind of lowly ugly woman, even if she dies, nothing will be different. Having finally gained power, she inevitably wants to accomplish things she was powerless to do in life, that is, killing those who are stronger and happier than herself. The Tomi beside her fell to the right, lying flat on the double bed, and spoke in a mocking tone. Destroying others' happiness just because you can't obtain it yourself. A vulgar and boring approach. Kawakami Tomi evaluated from a high vantage point. She didn't care about the killing itself. But, it was too ordinary. Mere killing, that's all. Kawakami Tomi was about to throw the notebook aside, but she suddenly changed her mind and flipped to the last page to look. For some reason, it felt as if she absolutely had to do this. Today, 4 noisy women came to my dwelling. I hate them. I hate them more than any of those guys who broke into my home before. Every class has people standing at the top of the pyramid. They are the kind of guys who can act willfully and are more arrogant than anyone else. I killed one of them. While she was combing her hair, I strangled her neck with my hair, hoisted her up, and strangled her to death. The way she struggled looked truly interesting. The last page was the very record of Kawakami Tomi being killed. Oh, that guy died. Seeing the text on this page, the Tomi's reaction was very flat. First one to get taken out, how embarrassing. Pity, it was strangulation. The Tomi's conversation was just like high school girls discussing where to eat dessert after school. Not only were their expressions flat, but they also carried a hint of disdain. Strangulation, without major blood loss, she could revive in a few minutes. Croak, croak, croak. Just then, a bizarre sound rang out from inside the wardrobe at the foot of the bed. It sounded like the moan of someone whose throat was blocked, or like bones twisting and rubbing together. The intermittent sound was exceptionally clear in the bedroom. The 3 Tomis stopped their laughing and joking simultaneously. Sitting or lying down, they all turned their heads in unison to look at the source of the sound. The door of the tightly closed old wardrobe suddenly slid open a crack. Looking in through the gap, the darkness was as thick as liquid. A stream of gloomy malice flowed out like a physical substance, filling the entire bedroom. Tomi's body began to tremble slightly, not out of fear, but from some more primal instinct. What the hell is that? Under the oppression of a massive malice, their bodies became stiff, and even breathing became somewhat difficult. The wardrobe door was pushed open to a wider gap. A pale figure, in an extremely unnatural posture, slowly crawled out of the wardrobe. She wore a dirty white dress. Her black long hair draped down like seaweed. Her grayish-white face was covered in dried blood, her eyes were bloodshot and wide open, her gaze revealing naked malice and resentment as she stared dead at the three women in the room. Croak, croak. Kayako lay on the floor, her neck twisted at a bizarre angle. On all fours, like a giant humanoid spider, she slowly crawled toward them. Ugly woman. Kawakami Tomi looked at Kayako with disgust. She wanted to straighten her body, but she couldn't move due to the oppression of the aura. And the sound she made caused Kayako's gaze to focus on her face. Intense anger, strong jealousy. Kayako's gaze also carried some kind of power, oppressing Tomi's brain and squeezing Tomi's heart. Don't get too carried away, you lowly clown. For trash like you, there is only one attitude to have before me, shame for your own filth. Tomi forced herself to cover her incomparably heavy chest. Her eyes revealed a malice completely no less than Kayako's, clashing in the air. Croak, croak. Strange sounds emitted from Kayako's throat. Her twisted head turned slowly, her stain-covered white dress dragging across the floor as she crawled toward Kawakami Tomi in a distorted posture. A gloomy chill injected itself into Kawakami Tomi's body. From her ears, from her nasal cavity, from her eye sockets, from her mouth, from every pore, it drilled into Kawakami Tomi's body, freezing every one of her muscles. The surrounding air carried a fishy, damp, moldy smell, wrapping around Kawakami Tomi's body. Get lost. Get away. Disgusting ugly ghost. Tomi tried to move backward, but her hands and feet felt as if they were filled with lead, even lifting a finger was exceptionally difficult. Kayako crawled onto that double bed. She extended a pale, bloated hand, the fingernails filled with black grime, and grabbed Tomi's ankle. Don't use your dirty hand. Crack. The instant before her voice faded, the sound of bones shattering was exceptionally clear. Under Kayako's claw, Tomi's ankle snapped like a withered branch. HSS. Tomi threw her head back in pain, squeezing a gasp from her throat, but it immediately turned into a trembling sneer. Classless ugly monster. Stop touching me with that dirty hand of yours. There was not the slightest fear, only the body's instinctive reaction and contemptuous spitting. You are nothing special. Compared to your violence, your filthy and ugly touch hurts me more. Kawakami Tomi seemed to speak these words in silence. In a split second, the gloomy and stifling atmosphere boiled over like boiling water. Just like Kayako's anger, that mocked fury turned into an invisible fire, burning Kayako's self-esteem. Kayako's grayish-white face became twisted and ferocious. Those bloodshot eyes stared dead at Tomi's face. She crawled up along Tomi's body, raised that icy palm, fumbled over Tomi's cheek, and roughly pried open her jaw. Fingernails inserted into Tomi's oral cavity, scraping against the upper palate, bringing a wave of nauseating sensation of a foreign object. Snap. The scalp-numbing sound of bone cracking rang out abruptly. Tomi's mandible was pried open to an unnatural angle. Her skin and muscles were brutally torn apart, the corners of her mouth splitting almost to the roots of her ears. Gushing fresh blood dyed her neck and the bedsheet red. Tomi's eyes bulged wide from the intense pain, and her body convulsed violently, but she was pressed dead onto the bed by Kayako's power. Kayako did not stop. She thrust her blood-stained fingers in along the torn wound, dug deep into Tomi's throat, and pulled down with force. Rip! More blood sprayed out. Kawakami Tomi's throat, along with part of her trachea, was roughly torn open, leaving only a mangled, bloody cross-section at her neck. That beautiful head tilted back helplessly, and those eyes that were always full of arrogance gradually lost their luster. Kayako released the limp corpse, turned her twisted head, and fixed her bloodshot eyeballs on the other two Tomis on the bed. Ah! She got killed again. A Tomi clicked her tongue, shouting exaggeratedly. So troublesome, there's blood everywhere. The other Tomi frowned, speaking with displeasure. With this much blood, at least 5 or 6 counterfeits could be born. This indifferent attitude turned Kayako into an embodiment of rage. She couldn't comprehend why Kawakami Tomi could be so composed. She now only wanted to tear Kawakami Tomi's face to shreds, so that composed face could never appear again. Kayako extended both hands and pinned down both sides of a Tomi's head. Under the face obscured by long hair, a twisted smile cracked open. Bang! Accompanied by a muffled sound that seemed to ring within the chest cavity, Tomi's temples collapsed inward, and her eyeballs bulged outward due to the change in intracranial pressure. A mixture of red and white splattered onto Kayako's pale cheeks and dirty white dress. That beautiful head deformed under her palms like a crushed fruit. The Tomi still alive looked at the 2 broken corpses beside her and sighed. Making a mess everywhere. She complained, her voice exceptionally calm in the deathly silent room. Do you know it's very troublesome to clean up? That guy won't allow a cleaner to come over either. TCH. What a rotten do-gooder. Kayako, however, paid no heed to Kawakami Tomi's complaints. Her hands grabbed Tomi's 2 calves. Ryup! Kayako pulled her arms apart. Accompanied by a hair-raising tearing sound, Kawakami Tomi's body was split into 2 halves from crotch to neck. Fresh blood and internal organs spilled out, falling onto the bedsheet below. For a moment, the bedroom became thoroughly quiet. The corpses of 3 Tomis were displayed in various twisted postures. A mess of red and white, internal organs flowing out, the heavy smell of blood overpowered the original moldy smell, and the aura of death filled the entire space. Kayako lay prone in the center of the pool of blood, her white dress already dyed dark red. She tilted her head, smiling bizarrely and triumphantly, emitting that croak-croak strange cry from her throat. She won. She had killed these intruders, these arrogant and beautiful women whom she detested to her bones. But, why was there not the slightest pleasure? A hollowness, as if she had gained nothing, appeared in Kayako's heart. The looks in those women's eyes before they died held no fear, only endless mockery and contempt. As if everything she did was nothing more than a clumsy performance. Creak! At this moment, the bedroom door was pushed open from the outside. Kayako turned her head in astonishment. The woman who should have died appeared before her eyes, alive and well. My! Are they all dead? This is too dirty, isn't it? Is this place even livable? Kawakami Tomi stepped into the bedroom filled with the smell of blood. While gently rubbing her neck, she roasted with dissatisfaction. The guy who died? Why can she appear here alive? Kayako could feel that the corpse in the bathroom was gone. The Kawakami Tomi before her eyes was precisely the one she had killed earlier. Did she not die completely and came back to life? Then kill her again. Kayako's figure vanished from her spot. In the next second, a sinister aura pressed tight against Kawakami Tomi's back. Tomi inexplicably felt her skin tighten like a balloon being inflated, her bones making sounds of being overburdened. Bang! Like a ripe fruit bursting from within, or a balloon filled with water exploding, Kawakami Tomi's body split open from the center. Shooting fresh blood, minced meat, and internal organs went everywhere, on the ceiling, on the walls, on the floor, it was all sticky red. And Kayako appeared in Kawakami Tomi's position, covered in blood red, revealing a smile full of malice. Now, surely they must all be completely dead. Underscore. Went more, Walnut-chan. New history, group chat of the dead. White heavy checkmark read 40 chapters ahead on every series. White heavy checkmark unlock supporter only perks and news. Let's reach these milestones together. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 free chapter for all readers. 140 members equals plus 5 bonus chapters for all series. Walnut-chan on P. Chapter 66, Oh no! The haunted house is haunted by Tomi. 1,318 words. Holy hell! The haunted house is teeming with Tomi. It hurts. A moan capable of rousing a man's desires suddenly rang out in the bedroom. This sound was like a steel needle piercing into Kayako's scalp. Kayako shuddered all over. Since becoming a vengeful spirit, this was the first time Kayako had felt fear. An inexplicable terror emerged from Kayako's heart, only to be swallowed by overflowing resentment. Kayako jerked her head around to look at the blood-soaked double bed. On the bed, shredded corpses and exposed internal organs were squirming just like living creatures. Split muscles bulged and gathered unnaturally, as if a sculptor were using Tomi's flesh and blood to carve. The contours of facial features were emerging little by little from the blurred gore. Eyes, noses, mouths. Flaps of face skin belonging to Tomi grew with difficulty from the torn abdominal cavities, connecting to ruptured blood vessels and muscle fibers like reliefs surfacing from blocks of meat. Being tortured to death by a woman, this is a first. In the past, it was always handsome guys doing the killing. Being killed by this kind of ugly woman is actually quite a novel experience. In the pool of blood, the surfaces of those scattered chunks of meat swelled with viscous bubbles. After the bubbles burst, granulation tissue squirmed like white maggots, forming smooth layers of skin. Then, the skin layers began to shape themselves, outlining eye sockets, nose bridges, and lips. Faces of Kawakami Tomi grew out from the corpse pieces one after another. Those faces varied in size. Some were only as big as a palm, embedded in torn muscle fibers, others emerged from a mass of blurred internal organs, carrying a slimy sheen. Their mouths opened and closed, emitting infuriating mockery. Wanting to kill us? What a stupid idea. Great strength, but it's a pity your brain is as useless as your face. Is this a female gorilla? Oh ho ho ho. The baseness of an ugly woman is always the same. Jealous to the point of wanting to kill us? Although it's stupid, it's also quite normal. He. So pitiful, I'm about to cry. Countless faces of Tomi stared at Kayako with eyes full of malice, their grinning mouths carrying unconcealed contempt. Roars of laughter exploded in the bloody room. Those faces of Tomi twisted, making various exaggerated expressions of ridicule. Layer upon layer of laughter came from every corner of the room, carrying echoes that drilled into Kayako's ears like countless red-hot steel needles. Kayako's body began to tremble. She covered her ears with both hands, a look of pain appearing on her pale face. Shut up! Broken syllables squeezed out of Kayako's throat. She appeared in front of a Tomi corpse, plunged her hands into the still squirming chest cavity, sank her fingernails into the warm, soft, sticky flesh, grabbed a slippery spine, and pulled outward with force. Splurt! Accompanied by the sound of muscles and tendons being forcibly torn, a section of spinal bone covered in minced meat and dark red blood was forcefully dragged out of Tomi's chest cavity by her. That beautiful head was still connected to the top of the spine, while mushy flesh and internal organs sloughed off, paving the bed like a carpet. Kayako raised that scepter made of a spine and a human head and smashed it ruthlessly onto another squirming corpse nearby. Bang! A dull impact sound rang out. The chest of that corpse instantly caved in. Several eyeballs that had just taken shape were squeezed out of the ruptured skin and flesh, rolling onto the floor like grapes, yet they continued to spin around, looking in Kayako's direction. Tasteless ugly woman, you can use a bit more force. The human head on the bone staff grinned with a bloody mouth, emitting a tease full of malice. If you think impotent rage has meaning, feel free to do it. Ha 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 ha. Come on. Come on. Incompetent ugly freak, go ahead and vent your dark, ugly desires. The mockery of the Tomis echoed from all directions like demonic sounds filling the ears. Shut up. Shut up. Kayako's thought patterns gradually collapsed. Indescribable anger and hatred burned her sanity, and her already twisted thinking thoroughly lost the ability to reason. Her full head of black hair danced wildly without wind. Her out-of-tune shrieks were full of madness and killing intent. Her figure flashed crazily in every corner of the room, sending flesh and blood flying wherever she went. She twisted off necks that had just coagulated, stomped on heads that had just taken shape, and tore out soft organs to throw against the walls. However, every act of destruction was accompanied by the birth of even more Tomies. Even a piece of minced meat the size of a fingernail could grow a tiny eye that stared mockingly at Kayako. In a short time, everywhere the eye could see was filled with Tomies' faces. The entire room had turned into a living hive composed of Kawakami Tomi. Kayako's mad yet bewildered shrieks and the Tomies' ridicule sounded like a grand chorus from hell. Kayako was probably going to be driven crazy by Kawakami Tomi. In a bookstore in the city area, Amamiya Rin, who was dominating Kawakami Tomi's body, held a manga magazine but had no mind to continue reading. A trace of horror and lingering fear flashed through his eyes. Although part of the reason was that Kayako didn't have much rationality to begin with, the combination of Kawakami Tomi's mental pollution and her undying body could only be described with one word: terror. If he hadn't grasped Kawakami Tomi's weakness and differentiated the Tomies, unless he truly attained the status of an Arhat, he probably wouldn't have been able to escape a mad ending either, right? Amamiya Rin raised a finger and gently rubbed the space between his eyebrows, letting the thought disappear from his mind and covering it with a frivolous thought. I can be considered to have solved the curse/Juon, right? Although I don't know how long Kawakami Tomi can trap Kayako, Kayako shouldn't be able to continue harming people for a short while. Can I apply for some bonus money from Indorenko? Amamiya Rin teased himself. Speaking of which, he really was short of money. He couldn't get the compensation payment in one go, and the compensation for mental damages was forever unobtainable because Hashimoto and the others had turned into Tomies. The Tomies basically had no assets, their current wallets all came from the offerings of other men before he established the rules. Using Tomies looks to make money? Although it was a simple method, it always felt a bit awkward. However, applying for a bonus from Indorenko was also impossible. After all, he couldn't let Indorenko know that he had the ability to interfere with Tomi to this extent. She belonged to a government department after all, with superiors managing her. I'm afraid no one in the political circles of Japan would be happy to see someone who could conversely dominate Kawakami Tomi to do things. Amamiya Rin shook his head slightly, put the manga magazine in his hand back on the shelf, and turned to walk out of the bookstore. He had already confirmed that the manga artist J had drawn a chapter about pressure training. It was time to make a trip to the publishing house. Walking out of the bookstore, just as he stepped down the stairs, a figure walked head-on and bumped right into Kawakami Tomi's body. _______. He. Walnut-chan for more chapters. New history, reincarnated as Mojito, watch me manipulate everyone. White heavy checkmark unlock a 40-chapter backlog for all my series. White heavy checkmark receive exclusive content and regular updates. Help us reach these goals. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 universal bonus chapter. 140 members equals plus 5 extra chapters for all stories. P. Walnut-chan. Chapter 67, The Praised Man. 1,401 words. Amamiya Rin tapped his toes against the ground, sank his waist slightly to skillfully disperse the momentum, and stood firm. Turning his head, he saw the person who had brushed past him was a fair-skinned young man, looking about 18 or 19 years old, dressed in an ordinary shirt and trousers. The young man, also stumbling from the reaction force, took a step back before dropping to his knees on the sidewalk tiles without a second thought. Hantoni Suma Mason. It was me not looking at the road. I bumped into you, I am truly, terribly sorry. He pressed both hands to the ground and touched his forehead to the pavement. His voice carried an exaggerated panic, his posture humble to an excessive degree. That booming voice attracted the attention of others. Passers-by subconsciously looked over, and the focusing of pair after pair of eyes made Amamiya Rin frown slightly. He was not accustomed to being knelt before like this, especially when wearing Tomi's skin, because Kawakami Tomi's charm always drove other people's emotions to extremes. It's fine, please get up. Amamiya Rin emitted a cold yet melodious voice. Not wishing to complicate matters, he moved to step around the man. Hearing the voice, the man raised his head. As his gaze touched Kawakami Tomi's cheeks, his entire being seemed to freeze. A look of stunned amazement exploded in his eyes. So beautiful. You are truly too beautiful. I have never seen anyone as beautiful as you. Your hair is like the finest black silk, your eyes are more captivating than gemstones, your skin is like flawless white jade. Oh God! You must be a goddess descended to the mortal world, right? The man's gaze stared straight at Kawakami Tomi's face as he praised her with an abnormally exaggerated tone. Amamiya Rin felt a wave of weariness in his heart. It's this reaction again. Tomi's appearance possessed an attraction to males that was practically rule level. However, he had no interest in listening to this hollow flattery, nor did he wish to be entangled by men. Amamiya Rin walked quickly past the man, heading along the sidewalk toward the intersection. Please wait. Seeing this, the man hurriedly scrambled up from the ground and trotted to follow closely, pouring out a ceaseless stream of praise for Kawakami Tomi's looks. Please forgive my presumption, but your beauty makes me unable to control myself. I have never seen a woman as beautiful as you. I fear there isn't a second person in the world as beautiful as you, is there? Your existence itself is the most beautiful gift to this world. Amamiya Rin's brows locked together tightly. He knew how strong Tomi's charm was, but those who became fanatical to this degree after just one meeting were the minority. I'll need to keep a mask ready at all times later on. Amamiya Rin couldn't help but speed up, attempting to shake off the man behind him. However, Kawakami Tomi was merely a frail woman. Even with the enhancement of the breathing method, without being in a limit-broken state, her physical strength would not improve. I say, could you stop pestering me? Although not very willing, Amamiya Rin decided to utilize Kawakami Tomi's charm. A slightly high-pitched voice rang out on the street corner, carrying obvious displeasure. Before the words even faded, the gazes cast from all directions became fervent, and even more numerous. The males passing by on the street, seeing such a beautiful woman being pestered by a man, immediately gathered around, having just been fretting over the lack of an opportunity to strike up a conversation. Hey, what are you doing? Show some respect to the lady. Didn't you hear her tell you to stop pestering her? Want to be a stalker? Get lost, quickly. 5 or 6 men inserted themselves between Amamiya Rin and the youth, blocking the young man and accusing him with righteous indignation. Blocked by these men, the youth had no choice but to stop. He piled an exaggerated apology onto his face, bowing repeatedly. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend, I just admired this young lady's beauty too much. Amamiya Rin seized this opportunity to leave rapidly. Seeing Amamiya Rin's figure drifting further away, the youth wanted to chase after him with some urgency, but how could those men possibly let him succeed? Still want to stalk her, huh? Miss, just keep walking, don't worry, we will stop this guy's criminal behavior. You bastard, are you ignoring us? I'm sorry. Please forgive me. The sounds of constant apologizing and the scolding words of the passers-by drifted from behind. Amamiya Rin did not pause for a single step, only after walking for about 100 meters did he glance back. Confirming that no one had followed, he finally slowed his pace. Really? It's not enough that only I can resist Tomi's charm. Amamiya Rin muttered to himself, sighing lightly. Approaching noon, Amamiya Rin finally arrived at Jay's publishing house, the office building of a certain Gakukan. Hello, I would like to find the editor in charge of the manga artist Jay. There is something regarding his work, pressure training, that I would like to inquire about. The receptionist at the front desk was a young woman. Tomi's charm was of no avail, and she merely smiled in a procedural manner. The receptionist glanced up at him, didn't ask many questions, and simply took out a registration book and pushed it over. Please trouble yourself to register your name, contact information, and reason for visiting first. Following the procedure, Amamiya Rin soon found a young woman wearing a necklace in the editorial section on the 3rd floor. The character's editorial division and Yama were printed on her name tag. She was precisely the avatar of Junji Ito in the manga, the editor in charge of the manga artist J. Perhaps this young woman, like the manga artist J, was a projection of the narrative structure, and her true body was Junji Ito's editor in the real world. Generally speaking, an author's research locations are considered relatively private information. We cannot disclose them casually. We are primarily concerned that readers might go there directly, disturbing the normal operations of the research site, which could also affect future cooperation with the author. Upon learning Amamiya Rin's purpose, Ms. Enyama revealed a troubled expression. A gym should belong to the category of public business places. Since it is open to the public, there shouldn't be so many taboos, right? Moreover, I don't think there are many people besides me who would come knocking on your door because of the nonsensical talk in that manga. Amamiya Rin spoke calmly. The so-called pressure training should normally involve tying bands around the arms and legs to restrict blood flow for exercise and achieve high efficiency. Yet, Ito Junji's pressure training involved throwing people into pressure cookers. Wasn't that obviously fake? Only Amamiya Rin, who had read this manga in his past life, would take the manga as truth. Ugh, let me ask Teacher J first. Ms. Enyama hesitated for a moment, picked up her mobile phone, and sent a text message. After waiting for 2 minutes, Ms. Enyama received a response. She scanned the reply and said to Amamiya Rin, Teacher J heard that a reader came to the publishing house because of his manga and was very happy. He stated that the gym is in X Ward, XX Town, and its name is called Katsu Sports Club. Amamiya Rin committed the address to memory and stood up to express his thanks. Thank you very much, and please trouble yourself to thank Teacher J for me as well. Ms. Enyama also stood up and said politely, You are welcome. Please continue to support Teacher J in the future. Definitely. Amamiya Rin nodded. Although it was somewhat regrettable not to see the avatar of Junji Ito, having obtained the intelligence, he delayed no longer and immediately left the publishing house to head for Katsu Sports Club. _______. He. Walnut-chan for more chapters. New history, reincarnated as Mojito, watch me manipulate everyone. White heavy checkmark unlock a 40-chapter backlog for all my series. White heavy checkmark receive exclusive content and regular updates. Help us reach these goals. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 universal bonus chapter. 140 members equals plus 5 extra chapters for all stories. P. Walnut-chan. Chapter 68, The Pressure Cooker's Fitness. 1,431 words. Katsu Sports Club. A bizarre and massive signboard hung on the wall. Its color scheme was harsh to the eyes, exuding an aura of cheapness mixed with aggressiveness. Amamiya Rin pushed open the door to the gym. The interior space was quite large but extremely crude, consisting of cement floors and walls without any decoration. The most conspicuous object was a gigantic cylindrical metal container in the center of the room. Covered in rivets and thick valves, it looked like a giant industrial pressure cooker, connected to a series of pipes that looked anything but safe. Several figures wearing uniform gray short-sleeved shirts were silently busy around the high-pressure cooker, checking gauges and wiping valves. Aside from them, 6 men and women were sitting in a row on the side. Hearing the noise, an exceptionally burly man turned his head. Embedded in his square face was a chin as solid and heavy as a butt. He wore a loose tank top, revealing muscle blocks that were distinct yet not bloated. Hey, bean sprout over there. Are you here for the pressure training? He crossed his arms, his gaze landing on Kawakami Tomi. There was not the slightest amazement at her beauty, only pickiness and disdain. Ah, yes. Amamiya Rin scanned the gym's environment and nodded in affirmation. Come on, take her to register, then measure her blood pressure. The man, who appeared to be the coach, shouted for a staff member to take Amamiya Rin to register and pay the fees. The cost was not low, a single session cost 20,000 yen. Tomi's meager savings wouldn't last for many sessions. After completing the process, Amamiya Rin was sent over to join the students waiting to start their workout. For men and 2 women, the number was small. No wonder the price was so high. How else would they make money with so few people? Newcomer? The students ranged from old to young, male to female. A tall man greeted Amamiya Rin with a friendly smile on his face, which made Amamiya Rin feel somewhat unaccustomed. Yeah, first time here. Amamiya Rin responded, feeling that something was a bit off. "Hello, newcomer. I'm Tanaka. I've been here 3 more times than you," another tall and thin student craned his neck to say to Amamiya Rin. "I hope to have another companion who can keep training together." Many students run away after just one session. A female student nearby also spoke up. "It can't be helped. Pressure training is too terrifying. Every time, it feels like taking a trip through the underworld." A man dressed like an office worker couldn't help but complain. "Don't be too nervous. You'll get used to it. Although the process is a bit special, it's much better once you get through it," a slightly chubby youth comforted Amamiya Rin. "Please rest assured. My willpower is the one thing I have the most confidence in," Amamiya Rin replied. At the same time, he realized what was wrong. It was too plain. The attitude of these people, whether the coach, the staff, or the students, showed no special reaction to him. Even though this body was indeed Kawakami Tomi, in the eyes of these people, he seemed to be just an ordinary new student. Does excessive fitness attract the same sex? Amamiya Rin couldn't help but think this. The face he had kept stern to avoid attracting men gradually relaxed. "Stop dawdling. Get over here. We're starting." The coach rudely interrupted their chat. Several staff members took out a bundle of black straps and walked toward the students. One of the staff members unceremoniously grabbed Amamiya Rin's arm, wound the strap around his upper arm, and then pulled it tight with all his might. In an instant, the strap sank deep into Kawakami Tomi's flesh. Accompanied by a violent sense of oppression, his arm went numb from lack of blood. The force, seemingly enough to sever the arm, made Amamiya Rin involuntarily suck in a breath of cold air. Is this torture? Amamiya Rin stared fixedly at where the strap was wound. The skin there had sunk nearly 5 centimeters deeper than the surrounding area. They were truly trying to strangle the flesh right into the bone. "Little girl, if you can't even endure this much, you definitely won't be able to handle the next step of the training." The tall student was also being bound by straps. He turned to look at Amamiya Rin, opened his mouth, and revealed a set of pale white teeth. Looking left and right, the other students also appeared accustomed to this. After the straps were tied, a staff member handed over a bottle of bubbling liquid. A crude label was pasted on the bottle, bearing 2 large characters, Superkatsu. "Next is drinking this super carbonated beverage." The coach raised a bottle of Superkatsu, a savage grin revealing itself on his face. "Use it to pressurize from inside the body. After opening it, drink it all in one breath immediately." Amamiya Rin's eyelids twitched. He gripped the bottle cap and twisted it open. Immediately, a dense gas sprayed out. The other students threw their heads back and chugged. Amamiya Rin followed suit, shoving the bottle opening into his mouth. The instant the liquid entered his mouth, there was an intense sweetness, followed by countless bubbles exploding crazily in his oral cavity and throat, pouring down his esophagus into his stomach. Almost immediately, an uncontrollable gas surged up from his stomach. Burp! Amamiya Rin couldn't hold it back and let out a loud belch. White gas shot out from his mouth, just like a sword immortal in a classic novel spitting out sword energy. "Cover your mouth. Don't let the gas leak," the coach roared immediately. Everyone tightly covered their mouths with their hands, and Amamiya Rin was naturally no exception. He felt the liquid he had drunk expanding crazily in his stomach, generating a massive amount of gas. In the blink of an eye, Kawakami Tomi's abdomen swelled up at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was like a balloon being rapidly inflated. The violent sensation of fullness brought intense pain. The stomach felt as if it were about to tear apart, and the internal organs seemed to be shifting amidst the surging gas. Everyone's belly bulged high like they were 10 months pregnant, their faces flushed red from holding their breath and the distending pain. Torture. This thing really is torture. No wonder there are so few students. Amamiya Rin complained frantically in his heart. He knew Junji Ito's manga was grotesque, but he hadn't expected this kind of gag manga type to be so tormenting as well. As ordinary people, it really wasn't easy for those few students to have lasted until today. The staff members immediately rushed up. They rudely wound straps around everyone's head several times, passing over the mouth and buckling it dead tight behind the head, thoroughly sealing any channel that might leak gas. At the same time, other staff members worked together to push open the hatch of that giant pressure cooker-like container. "Get in! Hurry! Phase 2 training begins." The students were half shoved, half herded into the interior of that massive vessel. Accompanied by a clang, the hatch closed, sealing off any exit. "Start! Pressurize!" The coach grinned savagely and pressed the start button. The next moment, inside the pressure cooker, the air seemed to turn into a solid. Unimaginable pressure attacked from all directions. Amamiya Rin felt his eardrums instantly cave inward, emitting a sharp ringing sound. He could no longer breathe. The edges of his vision began to turn black. His chest cavity was gripped by an invisible, colossal force, and his internal organs were forcibly squeezed toward his spine. His bulging abdomen was ruthlessly flattened. His limbs shriveled at an astonishing speed, the skin all over his body sticking tightly to the bones. Fat and muscle seemed to be sucked away out of thin air, the blood seemed to stop flowing. The bones felt as if they were being crushed by this force, emitting a scream of being overburdened, and even his cheeks sank deeply inward. How was this fitness training? This was clearly manufacturing mummies. Went more, Walnut-chan. New history, reincarnated as Mojito, watch me manipulate everyone. White heavy checkmark, read 40 chapters ahead on every series. White heavy checkmark, unlock supporter only perks and news. Let's reach these milestones together. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 free chapter for all readers. 140 members equals plus 5 bonus chapters for all series. Walnut-chan on P. Chapter 69, The Torment of Torture. 1,324 words. Unknown how much time passed, perhaps only a few minutes, yet it felt as long as a century when the humming of the pressure cooker finally stopped, and the pressure vanished. The shell, compressed like a shriveled mummy, gradually swelled back up, restoring the curvy figure that protruded in all the right places. However, Amamiya Rin, lying prone on the ground, remained motionless. He felt a burning pain all over his body, every breath pulled at his nerves, making them tremble. It was hard to imagine that his internal organs hadn't shattered. Was he actually still alive? This torture-like fitness method caused pain to the human body no less than, or perhaps even exceeding, Kayako's brutal slaughter of Tomi. After all, even Kayako couldn't compress Tomi's heart into a sheet of paper while allowing Tomi to retain clear consciousness and a living body. The hatch was opened from the outside, and light flooded in. Seeing the students lying in disorder across the floor, the coach revealed a satisfied, savage grin. Drag them out. 10 minutes rest. At the command, staff members immediately entered the pressure cooker, dragged the students out, and settled them against the wall to rest. I didn't die. After resting for a few minutes, Amamiya Rin finally recovered the ability to speak. You'll get used to it. Once you're used to it, it feels quite comfortable. The male student sitting nearby struck up a conversation with Amamiya Rin. He cheerfully rolled his sleeve up to his shoulder, displaying his arm to Amamiya Rin and speaking triumphantly. Hey, that's muscle, right? I've only trained 3 times. 3 times? Amamiya Rin took a look and couldn't help but let out a gasp of admiration. The muscle lines on that arm were fluid, the contours distinct, the mass even and not overly bulky. Every bundle of muscle fiber contained abundant vitality, like thick steel cables wrapped around the bones, the taut skin filled with a sense of explosive power. In Amamiya Rin's understanding, even the peak condition of top professional bodybuilders couldn't possess such strong muscles. This was already surreal. Don't be envious. Just persist a few more times, and you can do it too. That male student's face was full of pride. While showing off to Amamiya Rin, he was also encouraging him. It was amazing he could even say that. Who would encourage a beauty like Tomi to develop a body full of solid muscle? Amamiya Rin twitched the corners of his mouth, revealing a smile. Thanks for the encouragement. I look forward to it. He urgently needed Kawakami Tomi to have the power of self-preservation. This way, she wouldn't end up being killed, nor would she drive other men insane. Moreover, if Kawakami Tomi's strength became greater, he could also control her to attempt some trials and explorations. Before the world-ending natural disaster arrived, he had to master stronger power and secrets. The 10-minute break passed in a flash. The coach stood in the center of the venue with hands on hips, urging the students to participate in the second round of training. Several staff members wheeled over a few torture instruments that looked somewhat familiar. Their structure was simple and crude, composed of 2 thick wooden beams and ropes. If 3 more sticks were added and they were scaled down, they would be the torture devices used to crush fingers in period dramas. What was it called again? It seemed to be a zanzi. Seiza. Bend over. Stick your upper body in. Put your arms behind your back. Following the coach's command, the students did as told. 2 logs, one inserted between the abdomen and thighs, one inserted between the back and the arms. A staff member stood behind Amamiya Rin, stepped on the wooden log on the back, and gripped the ropes tightly with both hands. The next second, the ropes tightened violently. Intense pain erupted. The wood at the abdomen ruthlessly oppressed Amamiya Rin's internal organs, as if trying to squeeze out his stomach and intestines. At the same time, a strong aching sensation came from his femurs. The wood on his back felt like it was going to crush his shoulder blades and spine. His arms, twisted behind him, were sandwiched between the wood and his torso. The joints made creaking sounds, as if they were about to dislocate and shatter the next second. In an instant, the bones of Amamiya Rin's entire body were wailing. Huge pressure acted from both front and back simultaneously, as if trying to fold his body in half and shear it into 2 pieces. At this moment, without needing contemplation, Amamiya Rin could clearly feel the shape of every rib as they bulged from beneath his skin. And the ropes were still tightening bit by bit. The squeezing force continued to increase, and the pain, like stormy seas, crashed against his nerves in waves. This sensation was no better than the pressure cooker just now. It was purely another form of torture. Amamiya Rin sincerely admired those students who had persisted 2 or 3 times. Their willpower. No, that's not right. It had nothing to do with willpower. Amamiya Rin suddenly realized. His dhyana could stabilize the mind and enhance tolerance to pain, but no matter how deep the dhyana, it could not be maintained during this kind of intense execution. It had nothing to do with his spiritual cultivation. It was this gym that had a problem. This gym kept the tortured, the training students constantly awake and maintained their vitality. This gym was also a type of curse. Unknown how long passed, the ropes finally loosened. Amamiya Rin collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath, feeling as if his body had been run over. However, after the 10-minute rest, Amamiya Rin discovered that he was truly about to be crushed. The venue for the 3rd round of training was a flat, thick, massive stone slab. Amamiya Rin and the other students were thrown onto it. Accompanied by a humming sound, the ceiling actually slowly descended. That was actually also a thick stone slab. When the stone slab fell, tens of tons of weight were evenly distributed, pressing heavily on his head, chest cavity, abdomen, and limbs. That incomprehensible pressure was already indescribable, simply like it was going to crush the human body into a sheet of paper. Time became blurred and long amidst the immense pressure and the pain of hypoxia, but the pain was etched incomparably clearly into Amamiya Rin's brain. After an hour, the stone slab above finally stopped descending and began to rise slowly. Amamiya Rin collapsed on the cold concrete floor, gasping for breath. He felt as if the bones of his whole body had been taken apart and put back together. Every inch of muscle was wailing. However, under this extreme exhaustion and pain, Amamiya Rin keenly perceived the changes in the body. The body was heavy. Not the kind of heaviness from collapse and weakness, but a tangible, sinking heaviness as if the body weight had truly increased. He vaguely realized that under those repeated compressions, his body was being compressed, and his density was rising. Muscle fibers were forcibly squeezed tighter, and bones seemed to have undergone 1,000 hammerings in a forge. Skin, internal organs, even bone marrow. From top to bottom, from inside to out, every part produced a sense of solidity. He lowered his head and looked at his arm. Although it still belonged to Kawakami Tomi's slender silhouette, muscle lines were already visible, and power far exceeding the appearance was harbored beneath the skin. _______. He. Walnut-chan for more chapters. New history, group chat of the dead. White heavy checkmark unlock a 40-chapter backlog for all my series. White heavy checkmark receive exclusive content and regular updates. Help us reach these goals. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 universal bonus chapter. 140 members equals plus 5 extra chapters for all stories. P. Walnut-chan. Chapter 70, Unknown Mental Pollution. 1,416 words. Dragging his exhausted and heavy body out of the gym, the sky outside had already darkened. The streetlights were just beginning to flicker on, casting a pale reflection upon his face. A sensation as if a lifetime had passed welled up in his heart. Amamiya Rin turned his head to glance at the gym behind him, and an inexplicable, intense sense of attachment arose within him. Something is wrong. I am not a masochist. Amamiya Rin shook his head vigorously, silently reciting the Diamond Sutra in his heart to stabilize his mind. If nothing unexpected had happened, this gym likely possessed some form of mental pollution. It could influence the fitness enthusiast's state of mind without them even noticing. Incorrect. My condition is incorrect. Amamiya Rin leaned against the wall, supporting his forehead with his hand, a look of uncertainty flashing through his eyes. Maintaining absolute sobriety during the workout, increasing enthusiasm for fitness, and losing fear of anomalies, were these the only 3 types of mental pollution? It seems there is more. What else is there? What else? Amamiya Rin's palm gradually tightened its grip. More than that, a distinct intuition told him that his mental state had been subjected to even more influences without his awareness. After racking his brains for a long time, Amamiya Rin still didn't realize exactly how many problems he had developed. He only had a vague feeling that something was wrong with him. However, whatever the issue was, the harm shouldn't be too significant. After all, even the author avatar, Junji Ito, had experienced this pressure training. He wouldn't go so far as to pit himself against a lethal trap, would he? Moreover, he was currently using Kawakami Tomi's body. Even if there was harm, it wouldn't affect his true self. Gently patting his chest to soothe his unsettled mind, Amamiya Rin headed to a nearby Yoshinoya and ordered 2 supersized beef bowl sets. However, just as he was preparing to eat, back at Toto General Hospital, the door to his hospital ward was knocked upon. The nurse pushed a food cart over and peered into the ward through the glass on the door. Amamiya Rin's body lay flat on the hospital bed, eyes closed, showing no reaction. Is he asleep? The nurse muttered to herself, pushing the door open directly. Mr. Amamiya, it's time to eat. It's not good to skip meals, you know. Pushing the cart to the side, the nurse raised her voice and called out to Amamiya Rin. Hearing the nurse's call, Amamiya Rin gradually exited the state of contemplation. His consciousness floated up from the Tomi network and returned to his own body. I apologize. My spirit hasn't been very good these past few days, so I went to sleep rather early. Amamiya Rin opened his eyes and sat up straight. At the same time, a shrill torrent of abuse transmitted from the Tomi network. Idiot! 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 You bastard! You actually used my body to go to that kind of hellhole. That was basically torture. Do you know how much pain I'm in all over? Kawakami Tomi's piercing voice nearly punctured Amamiya Rin's eardrums. More importantly, fitness training like some stinking man? Is your brain broken? My body is perfect. How could you paint legs on a snake, ruining perfection with unnecessary additions? Making me become a muscle woman? Most importantly, what time is it now? 6 o'clock. It's 6 p.m. We agreed to switch at 3 p.m. every day. You don't keep your word. You controlled me for 3 extra hours. For Kawakami Tomi, pain was secondary. Her body was primary, but freedom was the most important thing of all. She was supposed to gain her freedom at 3 in the afternoon, yet she had been dragged along for a full 3 hours. How could she not be furious? Sorry. I was in the middle of fitness training, after all, I couldn't exactly give up halfway, right? Besides, don't look down on muscle women. Muscle women were actually one of my fetishes in the past, although, because of the white skeleton visualization, it's hard to arouse that interest anymore. However, by exercising the body and gaining a strong physique, you all will have the power to resist perpetrators. You won't need to worry about being tortured, massacred, or dismembered, creating a bunch of unauthorized knockoffs. Isn't that a good thing? Amamiya Rin responded leisurely. Compared to when he was utilizing Kawakami Tomi's body, his attitude now appeared much more composed. Your spirit isn't very good? No wonder. I noticed it as soon as I came in. You're. The nurse set up the overbed table, her gaze sweeping across Amamiya Rin's face. She spoke with sudden realization, your complexion isn't very good. That must be the reason. Remember to sleep early and wake up early, and don't let your imagination run wild. A patient like you should focus on normal recuperation, it's not good to prescribe sleep aids. My complexion isn't very good? Amamiya Rin froze for a moment and rubbed his brow. Although he had said his spirit wasn't good, that was just a casual excuse. He had just slept yesterday. In order to extend his lifespan and not waste time in the dream world, he intended not to sleep today or tomorrow. He planned to wait 2 days to learn more knowledge and skills before entering the dream again. This couldn't be helped. The time span of the dream was getting larger and larger. The last time was 10 years, this time it had become 15 years. Next time, he feared it would become 20 or even 30 years. What do you mean by that? Ha! You want to make us do fitness training too? Thoughts full of resistance transmitted from the Tomi network. Amamiya Rin's expression remained unchanged. I have already explained the stakes. We finally have a way to increase strength, do you really not accept it? You must realize, this suggestion benefits you, not me. Stupid idea. Why do you think we need strength to fight? Such crude matters are not what a Kawakami Tomi should be doing. The thoughts of the Tomis were arrogant in exactly the same way. Can't you change a little bit? Don't cling so stubbornly to your character settings. Amamiya Rin retorted internally, but he didn't force the issue. His current essential need for Kawakami Tomi was not the enhancement of strength, but the absorption of knowledge. The person who needed strength was himself. However, if we can enhance our own strength, maybe we can suppress Amamiya Rin. Yet, just as Amamiya Rin's thought of not forcing them passed, a thought from a Kawakami Tomi also flashed rapidly through the Tomi network. But it was only a flash. The Tomi network became quiet in an extremely short time, like a calm stream where fish occasionally leap and splash ripples, but mostly characterized by deliberate restraint. Amamiya Rin lowered his eyebrows slightly, his heart as still as water. The corners of his mouth hooked up in a minuscule arc, revealing a hint of helplessness. Hey! Ignore those small matters. What about me? At this moment, the thoughts of Tomi number 25 surged over. She questioned him aggressively. 3 hours. How are you going to compensate me? Compensation? That is truly a strange question. I didn't ask you to pay me back for the sleeping time, so why should I compensate you? Amamiya Rin asked Kawakami Tomi in return, adopting an attitude that took this for granted. You guy. However, if you can help me bring some sandpaper and cotton cloth, and a few more cans of black coffee, the next time it's your turn, your control time will be a whole afternoon and an evening. Not waiting for Kawakami Tomi to finish cursing, Amamiya Rin's will intercepted her voice. Wait for it. Leaving a rough voice behind in the Tomi network, inside the Yoshinoya, Kawakami Tomi revealed a ferocious expression. She shoveled the beef bowl into her mouth in great mouthfuls, as if she were eating Amamiya Rin's flesh and blood. _______. Read more, Walnut-chan. New history, group chat of the dead. White heavy checkmark access up to 40 advanced chapters of all stories. White heavy checkmark receive exclusive content and updates. Help us hit our community goals. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 bonus chapter for everyone. 140 members equals plus 5 extra chapters of all stories. P. Walnut-chan. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.